At Thanksgiving, my sister discovered I had $12 million and my family demanded I give it to her, claiming she deserved it more. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let us keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now let's begin the video using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. So I'm Ava, 31, female, and I need to get this off my chest. Do you know those family dynamics in which one child can do no wrong while the other appears to be invisible? Yes. Welcome to my life. Everything was very typical until I was 8. I was an only kid, and while my parents were not particularly warm and fuzzy, they were present. I suppose Mom would help me with my homework and Dad would occasionally take me fishing on Lake St. Clair. We weren't the Brady Bunch, but we were fine. Then came the night that would change everything. I remember it so clearly, like a wound that never healed. The night my aunt woke me up in the middle of darkness, whispering hurriedly that I needed to pack a small suitcase because my mom was in the hospital. Rachel was coming too early, 2 months too soon. And nothing in our lives would ever be the same again. I had no idea that moment would mark the beginning of my erasure from the family, the beginning of Rachel's throne being built brick by brick, while my place in that house dissolved into shadows. For weeks the house became a sterile bubble. The sound of bleach bottles spraying against the walls was as familiar as the tick of the clock. Every corner smelled of chemicals. Every cough meant exile. If I sneezed, I was sent to my grandma's. If I coughed, I was exiled to my aunt's. It did not matter how much I smiled or begged to help. I was the threat. I was the outsider in my own home. Rachel was fragile but adored, worshipped like a porcelain doll that must be protected at all costs. I began to learn the language of loneliness, how a child discovers in silence that love could be rationed like medicine and her portion had been cut to almost nothing. I tried to fight it. I tried to scream louder with achievements. I won awards. I worked hard. I practiced piano until my fingers hurt just for one chance that maybe this time they would look at me. This time they would see me. But every attempt fell flat. I remember when I won the science fair, I came home holding my ribbon with excitement bursting out of me. My father barely glanced at it as he asked if I could put the project in the garage because Rachel might be allergic to dust. I remember when I practiced for months for the school talent show and sat at that piano trembling with hope, and on the night of the performance, not a single familiar face was in the audience. Not one. Rachel had a mild fever, and that was enough to keep them home. 2 weeks later, they filled an auditorium for her clumsy flute recital, applauding like she had just played at Carnegie Hall. I began to understand something dangerous. The invisible wall between me and them was not temporary, it was permanent, and every year it grew thicker. My parents rewrote history around me. They called me independent when I was really neglected. They praised Rachel as special when she was just spoiled. I became the ghost that lived among them, polite, quiet, useful only when necessary, unseen when not. But in the silence I was building something. I was sharpening my edges in secret. Every rejection became fuel. Every forgotten birthday became a brick in the fortress of resolve I was constructing inside myself. They did not know it yet. But their favoritism was creating not a fragile girl, but a woman who would one day rise with such strength that they would choke on their own ignorance. The revenge was already taking root, quietly, invisibly, the way weeds grow through concrete when no one is looking. High school for me wasn't about fun, dances, or football games. For me, it was survival. While Rachel built her little empire of drama clubs and cheer squads, I sharpened myself into something sharper, quieter, and more dangerous. No one was watching me closely, which meant I could do whatever I wanted. They were too busy praising Rachel for being able to spell her name right, while I was quietly conquering. My desk at home was a fortress of color-coded notes, index cards stacked like weapons, and study plans laid out like battle strategies. Rachel mocked me, called me Rain Man, but I didn't care. She didn't understand, she never would, that being invisible gave me a freedom she could never touch. I joined clubs, I worked shifts at a diner, I debated, I wrote, I led. Every title I earned was mine alone, not theirs. No one clapped for me. No one hung my certificates on the fridge. But I collected them like hidden treasures, each one proof that I existed, that I mattered, even if only to myself. Then came the SATs. I remember staring at that screen for 20 minutes, hands trembling, because it didn't seem real. 1600. A perfect score. Less than 1% ever achieved it. My heart thundered with pride as I rushed home, hungry for even the smallest flicker of recognition. Mom, look. I held out the printout like a flag of victory. She barely glanced up from Rachel's homework. That's nice, honey, but keep your voice down. Rachel has a big test tomorrow. Rachel smirked, tossed her hair, and muttered, some of us actually have to study. That was the night I stopped expecting them to see me at all. But if they would not see me, then I would make the world see me. I applied to 15 colleges on my own. Every essay, every form, every deadline alone. When the acceptance letters came, I hid them under my bed like stolen jewels. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and finally, Michigan with a full ride. Tuition, room, board, books, all covered. The golden ticket out. The night I got that letter, I sat in my favorite library window and cried, not because I was sad, but because for the first time in my life, freedom was real. At the dinner table, I told them. Mom's fork clinked against her plate. Michigan? That's so far. What if Rachel needs you? Dad frowned. We can't afford to help you. Rachel's cheerleading is already costing a fortune. And Rachel? She smirked. Finally. I get your room. I need more space for my TikToks. My chest burned, but I stayed silent. I had already learned. Their words didn't matter anymore. Move-in day, they didn't even come. Aunt Kelly drove me, helped me unpack, and handed me an envelope. Inside, $500 from Grandma Marie. She wanted you to have this. She's proud of you. I cried that night, not because of the money, but because someone somewhere actually cared enough to notice me. College was chaos, cheap ramen, sleepless nights, independence sweeter than honey. I graduated summa cum laude while Rachel flunked out of her third school. But of course, nobody in my family noticed. And maybe that was for the best. Because in the silence, I was building something far greater than they could ever imagine. And then came the twist I never expected, the moment fate handed me the key to everything. My first job at an auction house. Boxes of estate jewelry. A brooch that wasn't costume at all. My eyes knew it instantly, the clasp, the weight, the maker's mark. Real. Rare. Priceless. In that moment, I realized the universe had given me a secret weapon. They had given me nothing. But I was about to take everything. The Kingston estate was supposed to be routine. Everyone thought it was just boxes of cheap costume jewelry, something to catalog quickly and push through auction. But the moment I held that Art Deco brooch in my hand, I knew. The weight. The clasp. The subtle engraving. This wasn't some trinket. This was the real deal, platinum, diamonds, a piece worth thousands. My heart raced as I stayed late that night, combing through antique jewelry databases, cross-referencing makers' marks, learning everything I could. And I was right. It wasn't just real, it was rare. The kind of piece collectors would fight over. I documented it discreetly, careful not to draw too much attention. That was the night I realized I had a gift. Within months, I became the jewelry expert at the auction house, the one who could spot fakes and hidden gems. Wealthy clients trusted me. They invited me into their estates, let me sort through their treasures. They thought I was just another quiet worker bee. They didn't see the fire building inside me. By 30, I had leveraged that gift into something greater. I left the auction house, partnered with a few wealthy collectors, and launched my own private appraisal business. Within 2 years, I was running exclusive estate sales for old money families. Every percentage cut, every discreet finder's fee, every carefully negotiated commission, my bank account grew and grew. And all the while, I stayed invisible. No flashy purchases. No loud announcements. Just quiet, steady power. By 35, I had crossed $12 million. $12 million that no one knew about. Not my parents. Not Rachel. Not even my closest colleagues. I built a fortress of wealth the same way I had built my escape, quietly, meticulously, without their help. But here's the irony. Even after all of this, my family still saw me as nothing. To them, I was just Sarah, the independent one. She doesn't need help. She'll be fine. They didn't know the empire I had built, the fortune I had secured, the life I had carved out of nothing. And in their blindness, they didn't realize what was coming. Because when you spend your whole life being invisible, when you are pushed aside and ignored long enough, you learn something dangerous. You learn patience. You learn how to wait. And you learn how to strike when the time is right. And that time came one Thanksgiving. Rachel's eyes fell on my bank statement, one careless slip, one overlooked document. Suddenly, the room went silent. Then came the gasps. The accusations. The demands. 12 million. Rachel's voice was shrill with shock. You've been hiding this? You need to give me half. No, you need to give it all to me. You owe me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink back. I looked her dead in the eyes and smiled. Because this was the moment I had been waiting for. The Thanksgiving table was silent except for Rachel's voice, sharp and cutting, like she had been waiting her whole life for this ammunition. 12 million? You've been hiding 12 million while Mom and Dad worked themselves to death? While I've struggled. You're so selfish, Sarah. You've always been selfish. The audacity almost made me laugh. Worked themselves to death? My parents had poured every ounce of their energy into her flute recitals, her soccer games, her college transfers. I was the invisible one. I was the one who had scraped, bled, and built something out of nothing. But in their eyes, Rachel still deserved everything. Mom's voice followed, full of that familiar tone that had haunted my childhood. Sarah, honey, you know Rachel's had a harder life. You should help her. She's your sister. Dad cleared his throat, his words carefully measured. Maybe half, Sarah. That would be fair. Fair. That word burned like acid. Where was fair when I was left alone at piano recitals? Where was fair when Rachel's C grades decorated the fridge while my perfect SAT scores were brushed aside? Where was fair when I packed my own suitcase every time I sneezed, shipped off like some dangerous outsider? For the first time, I didn't bite my tongue. No. The word cut through the room like a blade. Rachel's jaw dropped, Mom gasped, Dad blinked in disbelief. No? Rachel snapped. You don't get to say no. You wouldn't have that money without this family. You owe us. I leaned back in my chair, calm and steady, a slow smile curling on my lips. I owe you nothing. Everything I have, I built myself. Every dollar. Every deal. Every sleepless night. You weren't there. You didn't even notice. Her face flushed with rage. You think you're better than me? You think money makes you superior? I tilted my head, letting the silence stretch. Then I answered with something that made her flinch. No, Rachel. Not better. Smarter. Stronger. And unlike you, I don't need anyone to prop me up. The room erupted. My parents scolded me, Rachel screamed. The turkey grew cold on the table. But inside, I was calm. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was calculating. Because now the lines were drawn. That night, as I drove home in silence, I realized something vital. My family would never stop. Rachel wouldn't rest until she drained me dry. Mom and Dad would always side with her. They would spin stories about me being cruel, greedy, selfish. So I decided to let them. I would let them believe they were winning, let them take the bait. And while they were busy clawing at my fortune, I would be building the real revenge. I didn't just want them to regret underestimating me. I wanted them to drown in it. The first step? Gaining their trust just enough to make them reckless. And Rachel, blinded by greed, gave me the perfect opening. The days after Thanksgiving were quiet on the surface, but beneath it all, a storm was brewing. Rachel started calling more often, pretending it was casual chit-chat, but every conversation circled back to money. Sarah, I just don't understand why you're being so stubborn, she'd sigh. We're family. What's yours is mine. That's how it should be. I would play along, soften my tone, and drop little crumbs she couldn't resist. Maybe you're right, Rachel, I'd say slowly. I don't know how to divide everything yet. There are investments, properties, contracts. It's complicated. Her greed lit up like fireworks. Well, maybe I could help, she offered eagerly, her voice dripping with false sincerity. I mean, I've always been good with people. You know I can handle things. Inside, I smiled. Rachel couldn't handle a simple job, let alone multi-million-dollar deals. But that was the beauty of it, she thought she could. And people blinded by entitlement always set their own traps. So I dangled the bait. Maybe I could put some things in your name, I murmured one night. Just to make it easier. But it would have to stay between us. No one else can know. The silence on the other end of the phone told me everything. I had her hooked. She thought she was about to outsmart me, swoop in and steal what she believed she deserved. Meanwhile, I was moving quietly in the background. I met with my attorney, a man named Davis who didn't ask questions he didn't need answers to. We created documents, airtight and binding, that looked generous on the surface, but were poison underneath. One agreement would transfer management rights of certain assets to Rachel, except those assets were liabilities in disguise, investments already set to implode, debts masked as opportunities. She wouldn't even realize it until she was drowning. And then, when she was begging for help, the paper trail would show it had all been her choice. The more desperate Rachel grew, the more I leaned into the performance. I played the role of the guilty sister, the one who finally realized she had been too selfish. I invited her to coffee, told her I wanted to make things right. She ate it up, every word. Our parents too. Mom called me with a tone of relief, telling me she knew I'd see reason eventually. Dad congratulated me for doing the right thing. Their voices carried the same smugness I had heard my entire life. They thought I was folding. They thought Rachel had won. And maybe that's what made it so satisfying. Because the real victory was just beginning. The night Rachel signed the first set of papers, her hand shaking with excitement, I felt nothing but calm. Not joy, not guilt. Just clarity. For once in my life, I wasn't the invisible one. I was the one pulling the strings. And Rachel, my perfect little sister, didn't even know she was walking straight into the fire. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood polish and paper, the kind of scent that clung to every bench and floor tile, and for Sarah it was strangely comforting. She sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture straight, her navy blazer crisp, her hands folded neatly in front of her. To anyone watching, she looked composed, calm, maybe even indifferent. But inside, her chest carried a fire that had been burning for years. This was not just a trial, this was the reckoning of her life, and she had been waiting for this moment with more patience than anyone could imagine. Across from her, Rachel shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her once perfect hair looked frizzed from stress, her makeup was too heavy, and her hands shook every time she tried to sip water from the glass in front of her. Their parents sat behind her, whispering nervously, casting Sarah occasional glares, as if she were the traitor who had betrayed the family. But Sarah did not look at them. She never once gave them the satisfaction of her eyes. The judge entered and the bailiff called the court to order. Everyone rose, then sat again when the judge signaled. The silence was heavy, broken only by the shuffling of papers. Sarah's attorney, a seasoned woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, leaned toward her and whispered, "This is it, Sarah. Once the evidence is in, there's no way they'll walk away from this clean." Sarah nodded slightly, her gaze steady on Rachel. Her sister had tried to hide behind lawyers and excuses, but there was no hiding today. Today, the truth would not only come out, it would burn. The case itself was simple on paper, but devastating in reality. Rachel had forged documents to try to gain access to Sarah's assets, claiming she was entitled to a share of the fortune Sarah had carefully built over years of hard work in the antique and jewelry world. Worse, she had lied under oath in prior depositions, digging herself into a pit she could no longer climb out of. Sarah hadn't wanted it to go this far, but Rachel's greed had pushed every boundary. And now, the only way forward was through fire. The prosecutor began, laying out the facts clearly. "Your Honor, the defendant, Rachel, knowingly falsified financial records, attempted to gain control of funds that were never hers, and used family ties as manipulation. We have documents, expert testimony, and bank records to prove this. Not only was this fraudulent, it was an act of calculated betrayal." Rachel's lawyer tried to interject, painting her as misguided but not malicious, claiming she had been confused about her rights as family. Sarah almost laughed, but she didn't. She stayed stone still, her eyes fixed, her silence sharper than any words she could speak. Then came the witnesses. A banker testified about the attempted transfers. An expert in document analysis confirmed that Rachel's signatures were forged in her own hand, poorly disguised but obvious under scrutiny. The room grew heavier with every word. Sarah sat there, letting it all wash over her, the years of being invisible, dismissed, replaced, all leading to this moment where finally someone was saying aloud what she had known all her life. Rachel's selfishness was not harmless, it was destructive. When it was finally Sarah's turn to speak, the room went silent. She rose slowly, every movement deliberate, and stepped to the witness stand. Sworn in, she sat tall, her voice clear as she answered the questions. "Miss Sarah," her attorney began, "can you tell the court, in your own words, how this has affected you?" Sarah drew in a breath. She could feel every eye on her. She knew her parents were watching, judging, waiting for her to falter. But she would not. Not this time. "For as long as I can remember," she began, her voice steady, "I have been the shadow in my own family. Every achievement of mine was overlooked, every need ignored, while my sister was put on a pedestal. When I worked, saved, built a life of my own, it was not celebrated. It was treated as if it was temporary, as if eventually it should belong to her. This case is not just about money. It is about years of being erased, years of being told my existence was less important. And now, when she attempted to take what I worked for, she crossed a line that cannot be undone." Rachel shifted uncomfortably, shaking her head, whispering to her lawyer, but Sarah didn't look at her. She kept speaking. "I am here today not only to protect what is mine, but to show that I will no longer be silent. I will no longer allow myself to be pushed aside. This is my life, my work, my blood, my sweat, my future. And I will defend it." The courtroom was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, as if to take in every word. Her attorney smiled faintly and continued, "Thank you, Sarah. No further questions." Then came cross-examination. Rachel's lawyer tried to twist her words, to suggest she was exaggerating, that family disputes didn't belong in court, that Sarah was simply being cold-hearted. But Sarah didn't flinch. She answered every question with calm precision, dismantling their arguments with the same skill she once used in debate club. Finally, Rachel was called to the stand. She looked nervous, her hands trembling as she took the oath. Her voice wavered as she tried to explain herself. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," Rachel said, glancing at the judge, then at their parents. I thought I deserved some of it. She's my sister. Family shares things. She's always had more, always been the favorite." Sarah almost laughed again. The favorite. If only the courtroom could see the years she had lived, the endless nights of being overlooked, the empty seats at her recitals, the dismissive nods when she excelled. But she stayed silent, waiting. Her attorney rose again, papers in hand. "Ms. Rachel, are these your signatures?" Rachel hesitated. They might be." The attorney stepped closer. "They're confirmed by experts as yours. These are forged documents, created to access accounts that were not yours. Do you deny this?" Rachel's face turned pale. She stammered, trying to find words, but none came out clean. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. The judge silenced them with a bang of the gavel. Sarah's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the satisfaction of watching the mask finally crack. This was only the beginning. The real scandal, the moment that would shatter her sister's image forever, was still to come.